It's clear that some kind of significant offensive in the Donbass is coming. We're not yet sure exactly when it'll be, but I think this is the thing. At the moment, Dvornikov, he's got his new command, he's getting his battle plans together, and above all, he's getting his forces ready to strike. So we can expect something big happening, but not tomorrow.
Russia yesterday lashed out at Western nations providing military aid to Ukraine, threatening unpredictable consequences. Could one of those be the use of tactical nuclear weapons? The fear of every Western leader trying to help Ukraine. The Kremlin in the past has said they'll only be used if faced with an existential threat, but President Zelensky has said overnight that the world needs to prepare for it. One thing is certain, reports from the front page of the Times this morning that British SAS troops are in the country won't go down well. Mark Galeotti is an expert in Russian security for the Royal United Services Institute and author of We Need to Talk About Putin. Mark, welcome.
Hello.
Thanks very much for your time. First of all, let's deal with this question, which is on the front of the Times. I guess we might have guessed that there could be SAS troops secretly helping train Ukrainian troops with some of the kit that we've been providing to them. But reports of it splashed on the front of the newspapers. How do you think this will play out?
Well, I mean, obviously, of course, the Russians won't be happy. And it's worth noting that this will play to an interesting obsession that the Russians have got. As far as they're concerned, historically, Britain has always been their most subtle and dangerous adversary. And it's quite interesting, they've already been claiming that Britain is behind so many of the various activities that the Ukrainian state has been doing. So it will play to that. But let's be perfectly honest, I mean, the Russians can have expected nothing less. It is clear that the kind of tactics that the Ukrainians are using, highly flexible, small units operating, this is precisely the kind of thing that is the SAS's speciality. So, of course, there is an obvious kind of crossover there.
But how risky is this from the British government? Because we know the Pentagon, the US in the past have explicitly said that any training that they would do would not be conducted on Ukrainian territory because they didn't want to put US troops, in any guise, secret or otherwise, in Ukraine.
Well, I think there is clearly anyone in Ukraine is potentially at risk. I mean, as we've heard, whatever else has been going on in terms of the ground and sea war, the Russians still have the capability to launch long-range missile strikes. And they indeed have already done so against facilities in the west of the country, which they believe were being used for training and above all for the supply of weapons to the Ukrainians. So yes, I mean, there is clearly a risk to the individual soldiers in question. But I don't think we should be overplaying the risk to the UK more broadly. Obviously, I think the Russians are quite likely in coming months to ramp up their covert operations in the West as far as they can. But that would happen anyway. We've got to realize the degree to which the Russians like to use threats like that as simply a way of getting our attention and of trying to basically force us to back away.
And what are the other threats that we've heard about the possible use of tactical nuclear weapons? As I mentioned, in the past, the Russians have said that they'd only turn to that if there was some kind of existential threat facing them. But now, a warning from the CIA that they have practical evidence that the Kremlin is prepared to use tactical weapons, and also President Zelensky telling us we all need to prepare for to the matter.
Well, we have to realize the degree to which, again, this is about signaling. Putin knows that we pay attention when he hints at some kind of nuclear response, and he's been doing this for months now. Tactical nuclear weapons would be an absolute game changer. And let's be perfectly honest, if the Russians use them, even if they use them entirely against Ukrainian targets on Ukrainian soil, I think that would absolutely change the calculus within NATO as to what kind of regime they're dealing with, but also quite possibly change the calculus at home. We know that there's a lot of people within the Russian elite who are unhappy with the way things are going, but they feel that it is more dangerous to do something about it than to just simply sit back and hope that Putin knows what he's doing. I think that's the point when we might actually begin to see people within Russia thinking the old man is getting too dangerous for us all. So I think at this stage, given that we have this language, but there has been absolutely no sign from Western intelligence services that the Russians are preparing their tactical nuclear weapons. And we've got to remember, these things are stored a long way away. The warheads are stored separately from the missiles. So there will be activity that will be spotted by Western intelligence means of a variety of different sorts before anything can actually be launched.
What is your What is your analysis or understanding about what might be going through the minds of Putin and also the Russian leaders overseeing this operation in Ukraine after quite a terrible week of it? They're focusing on the east, they say, and yet little progress is being made there. There are still plenty of Ukrainian fighters still pushing back within Mariupol. And, of course, they had that flagship in the Black Sea sinking yesterday.
Yeah, the sinking of the flagship Moskva was embarrassing, and it has some kind of impact operationally, but it's not a dramatic sort of game changer. More broadly, I mean, although trying to crawl into the deep, dark recesses of Putin's mind is not an easy task, what we're clearly seeing operationally on the ground is now that they have a single operational commander in charge of the whole operation, which is something that has been lacking. General Dvornikov is clearly regrouping his forces. So they are moving the forces which withdrew from around the Kiev area. They're taking these depleted battalion tactical groups and adding new soldiers to make them operational again. So at the moment, we're in a preparatory phase. It's clear that some kind of significant offensive in the Donbass is coming. We're not yet sure exactly when it'll be, but I think this is the thing. At the moment, Dvornikov, he's got his new command, he's getting his battle plans together, and above all, he's getting his forces ready to strike. So we can expect something big happening, but not tomorrow.
And we've seen the response from the West ramp up somewhat. The UK government announced last week that they were going to start providing anti-ship missiles to the Ukrainians. And we've seen, obviously, the US come to the table with this sort of increased military aid package. Would you say the response of the West is ready, knowing what we know, as you just said there, about a possible offensive coming in the east?
I think the fair answer is it's getting ready. Different countries have responded at different paces. I mean, for example, I was earlier in Prague this week, and the Czechs have been very forward in actually presenting the Ukrainians with Soviet vintage T-72 tanks and armoured personnel carriers, because precisely these are exactly the kind of weapons that the Ukrainians are already used to using, and therefore there's no kind of training back sort of period. Whereas other systems will require much more in terms of training, not just the crews, but also the people who are maintaining them and such like. So, some countries are in a better position than others. Some countries in the West are being more assertive. I mean, obviously, the UK is very much at the forefront. But I think what's interesting is we're seeing a shift in the nature of equipment being sent. It's now much more the sort of military hardware that the Ukrainians will need precisely for the kind of offensive they're likely to be facing in the Donbass. So, I mean, I think it's clear that it is tracking across. Of course, the Ukrainians would always like more, understandably. But in the current circumstances, I think the West is doing the right thing.
Just very finally, the Estonian Prime Minister has been speaking to the Times this morning, and in the interview, she cast doubt on whether female leaders would resort to war as readily as their main counterparts. Do you think there's an element of machismo going on here?
I think there is. I mean, one ought to sort of bear in mind that Margaret Thatcher was not exactly a shrinking violet.
Yeah.
But I think that the key thing is that we do have a situation in Russia, particularly, where you have one particular leader who has built so much of his political capital around this macho, real Russian man who's going to make Russia great again. And he can't really back away from that. So I think it's certainly when it comes to a particular individual, that's absolutely true.
Mark, thanks for your time this morning. Good to talk to you as ever. Mark Galeotti, an expert in Russian security for the Royal United Services Institute, and his book, We Need to Talk About Putin, well worth a read.